Hi and welcome to MicroStrategy. My name is Michael Hoffmann and I'm working as a Principal Sales Engineer for MicroStrategy Germany. In this video, I want to show you how you can automate any kind of user and security management task using the new REST API and Python libraries from MicroStrategy. As you might know, MicroStrategy has a very powerful and comprehensive object model called the semantic graph in MicroStrategy. And with the new interfaces, you're able to work with any kind of object that is part of the environment. And this makes it very easy to automate administration tasks and to work with the objects and the relationships between these different objects. But first, take a look at the topics I want to cover in this presentation. I give you a quick introduction of the REST API, but then we will go to MicroStrategy IO. This is the Python library that is available on top of the MicroStrategy environment. And with that, you can work directly against the REST API. This makes it very easy to work with the objects and the relationships that are part of the MicroStrategy environment. Then I will show you how you can easy start with this library. Workstation has an integration of the MicroStrategy Python libraries, and there are several code snippets you can use to automate your task. This makes it very easy to learn these capabilities and to modify the code snippets for your own purposes. But then we will cover the main part of my presentation. I want to show you how you can use MicroStrategy Python library on top of the REST API using other coding environments, powerful coding environments like Visual Studio Code and Jupyter Notebooks. I will show you how you can integrate Jupyter Notebooks in Visual Studio Code as an extension, and there you have all your coding capabilities you need in order to do your professional coding scenarios. Okay. And then we will start with several live demos. First, I will show you how you can synchronize user objects that come from a database. Next, synchronization of group objects from a database. Then we will relate user objects to group objects. We will synchronize security roles to group objects. We will synchronize security filters to group objects. And moreover, we will synchronize folder objects, access control lists to group objects. Okay. And then I want to show you additionally how you can use the Python library to do something completely different. Okay, so in this example on item 11, I will show you how we can read the object model, the semantic graph, in order to extract user and group relationships from the semantic graph into a MicroStrategy intelligent cube. As you might know, MicroStrategy can work live against databases, but has also its own powerful in-memory engine, and we can leverage this in-memory engine as a kind of database, so we can import using the Python SDK any kind of object and put this into this intelligent cube. We can even relate different objects to each other in this intelligent cube, and then we can report on top of this intelligent cube about all the objects that are part of this intelligent cube. Moreover, I will give you a short introduction as an outlook, how you can read semantic graph object dependencies with Python. So not only user objects, group objects, security objects, and so on. Now we'll talk about attributes, metrics, dossiers, facts, tables, and so on and so on. And I will show you how you can visualize these objects using the MicroStrategy capabilities on top of the MicroStrategy environment. And with that, then we are done. Okay, so now let's get started. Here you can see a quick overview of the MicroStrategy REST API and the support of all the different objects that are part of the MicroStrategy metadata, like cubes or custom groups and data sets, and so on and so on. And each of these objects has corresponding functions you can use in order to work here against this REST API and the objects. The good news is that you do not have to understand all the details here. We will not code directly against the REST API. We will make it much easier. And for this, we will leverage the MicroStrategy Python libraries. And these libraries work directly on top of this REST API. And this makes it so easy to, for example, work with user objects or group objects and establish relationships between users and groups. Okay, but I just wanted to show you this is the pure REST API, and if you like, you can build your own code using any kind of programming language and work directly against these objects. But as I mentioned before, in this video, in this demo here, I will use Python as the preferred programming language, and the MicroStrategy IO Python library or Python package that makes it much easier and very smart to work on top of these objects for any kind of automation task. MicroStrategy integrated Python support and script support in the new MicroStrategy workstation. This makes it very easy for an administrator or, let's say, Python developer to integrate this kind of automation task directly into MicroStrategy workstation. And there, by the way, you can combine your Python scripts with access control lists, and you can certify them if you like. If we click here on this menu item, scripts, and I click on the plus item here, you'll see on the right side we have packages, but even more important, code snippets. And this makes it very easy to use code snippets for different object types in order to start your coding. So for example, if you would like to work with user management, you would like to create users or delete users or change users or relate users to user groups, you can just drag this code snippet here into the editor. And now you see here, you get a lot of examples how you can use this kind of object in your automation task. Yeah, so for example, create a new user or relate a user to a group, and so on and so on and so on. And by the way, this is the preferred option to learn really fast, yeah, how to use this library and the capabilities that are in this library. I used it in the same way to get an understanding of the different objects and relations and how to code them. But as a professional software developer, you might say, no, I want to use my own coding environment that I'm already familiar with. I want to use, for example, Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. I would like to use Jupyter and Jupyter Notebooks. And for sure, you can use this too, okay? And this is the way I'm working with MicroStrategy and the MicroStrategy Python library as well. Okay, so here you can see Visual Studio Code. In Visual Studio Code, you're able to install additional extensions. And here in my environment, I installed Jupyter to get Jupyter Notebook support. This makes it very easy to run code in blocks, and this makes it easy to debug code and to develop your code in this professional environment. So now we can jump directly into my demo scenarios. Okay, what's the use case? Typically, the customer has information about users or groups memberships, and so on in other systems. So for example, a database or a kind of repository, etc., etc. And the customer wants to synchronize this kind of data with MicroStrategy. He wants to create a user from a database in MicroStrategy. And moreover, when the object is created in MicroStrategy, the object gets a unique ID in MicroStrategy, a GUID. And a typical use case is to synchronize back this GUID with the repository so that we have an overview of the objects between both systems and the corresponding GUID that is then available in both systems. Okay, so in my scenario, we have different tables here. In my database, we have a table about users, about groups, about group memberships, and ACLs. And here you can see the data of the user table. So we have username, full name, password, and a default email, but no ID, no GUID at the moment, because this object is not yet available in MicroStrategy. Okay, same with groups. So we have groups here, and we have a corresponding security role and security filter. We want to relate the security role and security filter with the group that should be created in MicroStrategy. As you can see here, we don't have a GUID at the moment because this object is not in MicroStrategy at the moment. We need to create it, then read the GUID and write back this GUID into this table. We have group memberships between users and groups, and we have ACLs. Okay, so we have different access types. So for example, a typical consumer, a power user, and we want to give the user groups here we want to give them access as a user or a power user on top of the corresponding folders. So this is a typical scenario. The user gets access, defines access on top of user groups, and then this is derived down to the users, and an ACL is defined on the folder level and is related to a user group that has an ACL, and with that the users in the user group will get access in the same way. This is a typical scenario. Okay, so now let's jump into my Python code. Okay, in the first example, I want to create a new user that comes from the database. And here you can see the script to do this. It's not only the process to create a new user, it's also the update of a user that is already part of MicroStrategy. And you can see here I'm using a SQL library called Python ODBC. I'm connecting here to the SQL server. I'm selecting the table. I'm reading the data from the table. And then I'm using the user object from MicroStrategy to create a user and to assign an address. After that, I have the new user object with the created unique ID. And I'm using this ID to write this ID to the database. I'm updating the table in the database, and that's it. In case the user is already there in MicroStrategy, I'm changing and updating the data in MicroStrategy. You can see here I have a function called getMicroStrategy_connection, and this is part of this file here. It creates a connection object. For a connection object, you need a base URL, username, password, and project. As an example, there are different types of connections. You can use two. In my scenario, very easy, I'm using username and password, and these parameters come from a constants file. You can see here the endpoint of a MicroStrategy environment, username, password, and so on. And with that, I created two user objects. And now let's run this code. Okay, now I'm running this code in the terminal, and you can see now a connection is established. Users are written, okay, and we are done. Now take a look. Is it really there? You can see here the list of users. I click on update, and you see the new users are now here in MicroStrategy available. And now we do the same with the group objects and the relationships between the users and groups. So this is the code to create the group objects. We run this code. And you can see now the groups are created. Okay. We step to the next code snippet here that I created. This is in order to create the relationships between the users and groups. We add the users to the groups. Let's run this. Okay, relationships are created. Okay, and now let's take a look in MicroStrategy workstations if the objects and the relationships are really there. So here I'm in workstation. I update the groups, and you see both groups are now here. And you can see the relationships to the user objects are there as well. In the next step, we want to synchronize security roles and security filters. This information is part of the user group definition in the database. And after this, we want to synchronize ACLs. So ACLs should be related to folders, and these folders are related to user groups. So this is a relationship that we want to establish here with our code. Okay, so first example, we want to synchronize security filter and security roles. Let's run this code. Connection established, and we are done. Okay, so this was the part for security roles and security filter. And here we have the part to set up the ACLs. Yeah, we want to define access rights for the user groups on top of specific folders. And we want to push down the ACL definition to all the client folders that are part of the main folder. Okay, let's run this code. Okay, folder 1, folder 2, and we are done. Okay, now let's take a look in MicroStrategy Workstation if the objects and their relationships are really there. Okay, so we update, refresh the view. We have the user group 1. We go into edit, project access and roles. And here we can see the security role is defined and related to this group. Let's click on security filters. And now you will see the security filter, demo security filter 1 is now related to demo user group 1. Okay, same with demo user group 2. So project access is demo security role 2, and security filter is related to this user group. Okay, and now let's jump into the folder structure. So I would like to go into my demo environment. I want to go into the reports, and there I want to go. Okay, and now here I have my 2 folders, and I click on the properties, and here security access, and you see here demo user group 1 has only view access, so just consumer access, and demo 2 has full control access. In the next example, we want to do something completely different. We want to read the objects from the MicroStrategy metadata. We want to read users and groups and the relationships. And then we want to extract this data, and we want to push this data into a new created MicroStrategy intelligent cube. And we want to use this information then later to create dossiers in order to report on top of this data, and so on and so on. So this is a really absolutely different task, and you can do this easily with MicroStrategy, because the interface and the Python library can give you access to these intelligent cubes, and you can create new cubes, and you can even create relational schema in this cube. So for example, you can create a user table and a groups table, and then a table in between that relates users to groups, and so on and so on. And this can all be done with Python and with this REST API. Okay, so here you can see the example. I'm creating different tables here in this supercube, in this intelligent cube. And for that, I need to read first the data from the metadata. And therefore, I created some list objects here in Python. And I'm adding data to this list objects. You can see user information, user ID, username, full name, email address, and so on. I do the same with user groups. I do the same with the user group memberships. And then I'm creating an object called data frame. Data frames are extremely powerful. This is a special library, a special Python library, and it makes data preparation very easily. And a data frame is like a table, and MicroStrategy has support for data frames in the Python library of MicroStrategy. So in other words, you can read a data frame directly into an intelligent cube, but on the other hand, you can extract data from an intelligent cube or a data set directly into a data frame, and from there you can do whatever you like in Python with this data. Okay, in my scenario here, I'm using the data from MicroStrategy. I'm reading the data from MicroStrategy in lists, in Python lists, and then I'm combining these lists, as you can see here, to a data frame. And we have different data frames here. We have a data frame for the user table, for the user groups table, and for the memberships table. And then I'm creating the cube, and I'm pushing the data to the cube. And in this cube, the data is related based on the column names automatically. And this gets the perfect basis then for my analysis I would like to do later on top of this data. Okay, and now let's run this code. Okay, so first we read all the user info from the metadata into the Python lists. This takes some time because from a user object you need to set up a new query to all the addresses, because a user can have several addresses. Okay, but now we are done. We have created now this cube. The cube has 3 tables, and these tables are related to each other. So a user table, a user group table, and a table that is relating user to user groups. Okay, and now we're done. Let's take a look at MicroStrategy Workstation and if the cube is there. Okay, we click Update, and now you can see here is the cube. Let's take a look at the cube. Okay, MicroStrategy is scanning the cube. And as you can see here, this is not a cube with only one table. We have a user table here, we have user group table here, and we have the table that relates users to user groups because we have a many-to-many relationship. You can do a lot more than what I showed so far using this Python library and the REST API. In my examples, I showed you how to synchronize user groups, doing typical administration tasks. But for example, you can use the same Python library in order to connect directly to the schema and the application objects and read dependencies between all these different objects. And here you can see the result of a Python script that extracted data from the semantic graph by level dependencies. Yeah, so for example, if we jump in from the attribute level, you can see attributes are related directly to document dossiers, others are related to metrics. These metrics, some of them are related to dossiers, others are related to other metrics, and so on and so on. So it's very convenient here to use these dependencies in order to navigate between different dependencies between these application objects. Yeah. Another example, similar use case. We are using Python library here to extract metadata from the semantic graph. But here in this example, I created lookup tables for metrics, for facts, for tables with all the many-to-many relationships between all of them. This is more a use case where you jump in using dedicated objects and then follow the dependencies from this object down to the table. This is another use case, how to leverage Python SDK. Okay, and with that, I'm now done with my presentation. I hope you enjoyed this little introduction of the Python libraries and the combination with the REST API. It's really a powerful approach to automate anything in MicroStrategy, but on the other hand, to leverage these objects in order to set up other use cases that empower your solution. Thanks a lot for watching, and I wish you all the best. Bye.